The night King Robert Baratheon rode into Winterfell, the world had already begun to change, though no one in the north could feel it yet. The air was cold, sharp with the coming winter, and the dire wolves howled as if they sensed something greater than kings and crowns. Robb Stark stood tall beside his father, every inch the heir of Winterfell proud, red-haired, fierce in the eyes, and just a few steps behind him stood Jon Snow, quieter, darker, watching everything with a silence that felt older than his years. Most men saw only a lord's true-born son and his bastard half-brother. They were wrong. When Lord Eddard Stark rode south to serve as Hand of the King, he left Winterfell in Robb's care. Robb was young, yes, but the North respected strength, and they saw Ned Stark in his son. Jon remained at Winterfell longer than he did in the known story. He did not leave for the Wall immediately. Something in him hesitated. Something in him hesitated. Something in Ned's eyes the night before he left lingered unspoken. "You are as much my blood as any of them," Ned had told him quietly. Jon carried those words like armor. When the Raven arrived with news of Ned Stark's arrest for treason, Winterfell changed overnight. The great hall, once warm with laughter, turned cold with whispers and rage. Robb called the banners. Lords from Carhold, Bear Island, White Harbor, and the Dreadfort rode to Winterfell in a storm of steel and fury. Robb was declared king in the north after Ned's execution. The great Jon roared it first, slamming his sword against the stone floor. The hall shook with the cry, "The king in the north!" Robb accepted it. He had to. His father was dead. His sisters were captives. The South had betrayed them. But that night, long after the cheering had faded, Robb sat alone in his chambers, and Jon came to him. "You should not be alone," Jon said quietly. Robb gave a bitter smile. "A king is always alone." Jon stepped closer. "Then you shouldn't be king alone." Robb looked up sharply. There was no mockery in Jon's voice, no envy, only calm truth. "You are my brother," Jon continued. "Not half, not bastard. Brother, if you ride to war, I ride with you. Not behind you, with you." Those words planted something dangerous and powerful in Robb's heart. The next morning, Robb shocked every lord in the hall. "I will not rule alone," he declared. "The North is strong because we stand together. Jon Snow is my brother in blood and battle. He will stand beside me. The North will have two wolves." The hall erupted, not in cheers this time, but confusion. Some lords frowned. Roose Bolton's eyes narrowed slightly. Catelyn Stark's face stiffened, pale as snow. The word bastard hung in the air like poison. But Robb did not waver. "He has Stark blood," Robb said firmly. "He has Stark honor. If you question him, you question me." The great Jon was the first to kneel. Then I kneeled to both wolves. One by one, slowly, uncertainly, the others followed. Jon Snow was no longer just a bastard of Winterfell. He became something new, something dangerous to their enemies, a symbol that the North would not fracture. That Stark loyalty ran deeper than tradition. When they marched south, it was different from the history people once knew. Robb led the vanguard, bold and fierce. Jon commanded the scouts and flanking forces, quiet and calculating. Where Robb inspired with fire, Jon controlled with ice. Soldiers began whispering about them, the young wolf and the silent wolf. The first real test came at the Whispering Wood. Jaime Lannister never expected two commanders thinking as one. While Robb drew the Lannister forces into the trap, Jon cut off their escape with a silent maneuver through the forest. Jaime was captured not just by courage but by strategy. Neither Stark alone might have managed. The victory shook the realm. In King's Landing, whispers spread like wildfire. "There are two of them now." Tywin Lannister frowned over his maps longer than before. Two young wolves meant twice the unpredictability. But power always creates tension. In Riverrun, after victories and war councils, cracks began to form not between the brothers, but around them. Lords who had bent the knee to Robb now had to answer to Jon as well. Some obeyed. Others obeyed with tight smiles. Catelyn watched Jon carefully. She could not deny his skill. She could not deny the men respected him. That frightened her more than open rebellion would have. And then came the choice that once destroyed Robb Stark's fate, the marriage alliance with House Frey. This time, Jon was there in the council chamber. "We need their crossing," Robb said. "Yes," Jon replied. "But we don't need their pride." Jon proposed something different: divide their forces, secure an alternative crossing quietly through negotiation with smaller river lords, while still treating with Walder Frey. Do not give the old man everything. Do not bind the North to a fragile promise built on insulted vanity. Robb listened, and for once he did not carry the burden alone. The Red Wedding, as it once would have been known, never took shape in the same way. Suspicion lingered. Suspicion lingered. Spies reported Bolton movements that felt wrong. Jon pressed Robb to rotate their camps, to never gather all strength in one hall. "Trust no feast during war," he said. The North began to survive the mistakes that once doomed it, but greater storms were rising beyond politics and betrayal. Far to the north, beyond the wall, darker things were stirring, and though no one in the southern battlefields could see it yet, Jon felt it in his bones. Something colder than Lannister gold, something older than thrones, and ruling together would soon demand more than strategy. It would demand sacrifice, because the South feared two kings. But winter did not care how many wore crowns, and it was coming. The war in the Riverlands stretched longer than anyone expected. Victory after victory strengthened the North's position. Yet it also painted a larger target on the backs of the two young kings. Camps whispered at night about how unnatural it was. Two rulers sharing one crown. Some called it strength, others called it weakness, waiting to split open. But Robb and Jon stood unshaken. They had fallen into a rhythm few commanders could master. Robb led from the front, riding hard into battle with gray winds snapping at his side. His presence lit fire in men's hearts. They would charge through arrows for him. They believed in him. Jon, however, stayed slightly behind the initial clash, watching the movement of banners, calculating enemy retreat lines, predicting betrayal before it bloomed. Ghost moved silently through trees and shadows, as if even the direwolf understood his master's role. It was this balance that frustrated Tywin Lannister most. In Harrenhal, Tywin studied reports with growing irritation. "The boy fights like a storm," he muttered of Robb, "but the bastard thinks like a general." That word bastard was spoken like a weapon. In King's Landing, Joffrey raged about humiliations. One came was insult enough, he screamed in the throne room. Two, "I want their heads mounted together," but the realm was shifting in ways the Iron Throne could not fully control. The real strain did not come from battle. It came from within. One night, inside a dimly lit tent heavy with maps and candle smoke, Robb stared down at the parchment between them. News had arrived from Winterfell. Theon Greyjoy had returned to the Iron Islands. Balon Greyjoy was raising sails. Jon read the letter twice, his face still as frozen water. "He will attack the north," Jon said. Robb clenched his jaw. "Theon is my brother." Jon looked up slowly. "No, he was your friend." Silence filled the space between them. This was the first true divide, not of loyalty, but of heart. Robb still believed in bonds forged in childhood. Jon believed in patterns of survival. The Ironborn did not care about northern honor. "If he takes Winterfell," Robb began. "He won't," Jon cut in, though his voice carried something deeper than certainty. "We left Sir Roderick in charge, and Bran is there." But even as he spoke, unease coiled in his chest. Weeks later, ravens arrived that shattered everything. Winterfell had fallen. Theon Greyjoy had taken it. Bran and Rickon were reported dead. The camp felt the shift instantly. It was as if someone had torn the heart from the army and left it bleeding in the dirt. Robb collapsed into rage. He overturned a table in his tent. Maps scattering like wounded birds. I should have sent him away. I should have seen it. Jon stood still, absorbing the storm. His own grief was silent but crushing. Bran, Rickon, the boys he had sparred with, laughed with, protected. "We will take it back," Robb swore. "Yes," Jon said calmly, but not blindly. This time Jon argued for division of command. Robb would maintain pressure in the south, keeping Lannister forces stretched thin. Jon would ride north with a chosen force swift, disciplined, loyal to retake Winterfell before the Boltons or Ironborn could solidify control. The lords hesitated. Some whispered that dividing the wolves would weaken them. Others feared giving the bastard independent command. Robb silenced them. "My brother rides with my authority," he declared. "His word is mine." So Jon rode north. The journey home was colder than any he remembered. Every mile felt heavier. Ghost ran ahead like a pale omen. When they reached the outskirts of Winterfell, smoke stained the sky. But the castle was not ironborn black and gold. It bore flayed banners. Bolton. Jon's jaw tightened. The betrayal was no longer subtle. Roose Bolton had moved faster than anyone predicted. He had used the chaos of Theon's foolish rebellion to position himself as rescuer and conqueror. Jon did not attack immediately. He watched, studied, counted torches, measured patrol patterns. His patience frustrated some northern captains, but they obeyed. 3 nights later, under cover of a snowstorm, Jon launched a precise assault. Silent archers eliminated outer guards. Small units scaled the walls where Bolton men grew lazy in assumed safety. The fighting inside the courtyard was brutal and close. Jon faced Ramsay Snow in the chaos near the stables. Ramsay laughed when he saw him. "Another bastard come to play Lord?" Jon did not answer with words. Their fight was fast, vicious. Ramsay fought dirty, wild, unpredictable, but Jon fought with purpose. When Ramsay fell bleeding into the snow, there was no triumph in Jon's eyes, only cold resolve. Winterfell was reclaimed before Roose could respond, but victory tasted bitter. The bodies of 2 burned boys had been displayed as Bran and Rickon. Jon ordered them buried with dignity, though doubt lingered in his gut. Something about it felt wrong. When word reached Robb that Winterfell was restored, relief mixed with new understanding. The North was no longer threatened just by southern lions. It was rotting from within. When Robb returned north months later to reunite with Jon, their embrace was tighter than ever, but different. They were no longer boys playing at swords in the yard. They were kings who had survived betrayal, standing atop Winterfell's walls looking over snow-covered lands. Robb spoke quietly. "They're afraid of us." "They should be," Jon replied. But Jon's eyes were turned further north, because reports had begun to arrive from the wall. Dead men walking, wildling armies gathering, and something ancient stirring in the dark. 2 kings might conquer traitors. But what was coming would test whether the North could survive even united. "Winter is coming," Robb said softly. Jon nodded. "Yes," he answered, "and this time it won't care who sits on any throne." The first time Jon saw the white with his own eyes, the world became simpler and more terrifying at the same time. He had ridden to Castle Black after the ravens from the wall grew too desperate to ignore. The Night's Watch spoke of wildlings moving in numbers not seen in generations, of shadows in the woods, of dead men rising with blue eyes that did not blink. Robb had not wanted him to go alone. "We face Lannisters, Boltons, Greyjoys," Robb had argued inside the Great Hall of Winterfell. "And now you want to chase ghost stories?" Jon had stepped closer to the firelight, his face calm but firm. "If the wall falls, none of that matters." The lords muttered. Some laughed quietly. Old Nan's tales were not fit for war councils, but Robb saw something in Jon's eyes. Not fear, not imagination. Certainty. So they agreed on something that would change the fate of the North forever. They would rule divided but stand united. Robb would remain in Winterfell, rebuilding alliances, strengthening the North's fractured loyalties. Jon would go to the Wall, not as a bastard seeking purpose, but as a king in his own right, bringing men, food, steel, and authority. When Jon arrived at Castle Black, the brothers of the Night's Watch did not know how to react. Some knelt, some looked uncomfortable. Jeor Mormont studied him long before speaking. "You wear a crown now?" "I wear responsibility," Jon answered. It was not long before the proof came. A ranging returned, half-mad, dragging chains tied to something wrapped in black cloth. The men gathered in the yard, breath fogging in the bitter wind. When the cloth was pulled away, the corpse inside lay still, dead for days. Then its eyes opened, blue, cold, empty. Chaos erupted as the thing lunged, teeth snapping, fingers clawing. It took 3 men to pin it down. Steel barely slowed it. Only fire ended it. Jon watched it burn, and in that moment, every political battle he had fought felt small. He wrote to Robb immediately. "This is not rumor. This is war, and it is older than crowns." Robb's reply came days later. "Then we fight it together." And so something unprecedented happened in the history of Westeros. The North declared its true war not against the Iron Throne, but against the coming winter. Robb called the banners again, but this time not for southern conquest. He commanded every lord to send men to reinforce the wall. Food stores were redirected. Blacksmiths worked day and night forging dragonglass-tipped weapons after Samwell Tarly sent word of its effectiveness. Some lords resisted. "We starve ourselves for wildling tales," one Karstark cousin argued. Robb silenced him with a cold glare. "You swore to House Stark. This is House Stark's command." But unity was fragile. News reached King's Landing quickly. 2 northern kings fortifying the wall instead of fighting each other. It confused and angered the southern court. Tywin Lannister saw opportunity. "If they fear the north," he told his council, "let winter consume them." Supplies moving north began to face raids. Southern traders were delayed. Gold was sent quietly to restless northern houses. Division, once planted, grows easily. Back at the wall, Jon made a choice that would test even his bond with Robb. He met with Mance Rayder beyond the wall. The king beyond the wall expected arrogance. Instead, he found negotiation. "We fight the same enemy," Jon told him. "You just refuse to kneel." Mance studied him carefully. "And would your brother agree to that? Sharing land with free folk?" Jon hesitated. He did not know. When Jon proposed allowing wildlings south of the wall under strict terms, disarmed, settled in abandoned northern lands, sworn to fight the dead, the Night's Watch nearly mutinied. "They're raiders, murderers," some shouted. "They're alive," Jon answered sharply, "and the dead are not." When Robb received the proposal, the great hall erupted into argument. Catelyn Stark looked at Jon as if seeing a stranger. "You would open our lands to them?" "To save our lands," Jon replied. Robb sat silent for a long time. Finally he stood. "If winter is truly what Jon says, then we need every sword." It was not a popular decision. The first wildling groups crossing the wall were met with distrust, sometimes open hatred. Northern farmers gripped axes tighter. Children hid behind doors. But slowly, as wildlings and Northmen trained side by side against captured whites brought south for proof, something began to shift. The enemy was undeniable. Then came the first major assault. Hardhome burned. Thousands died, and survivors brought stories of White Walkers moving like silent kings through blizzards. Jon barely escaped with ships full of refugees. When he returned to Eastwatch by the sea, exhausted and frostbitten, Robb was there waiting. The reunion was not warm, it was urgent. "They're marching," Jon said without greeting, "an army that does not tire." Robb looked at the sea, gray and endless. "Then we make our stand." For the first time, the two wolves stood together at the wall, not divided by duty, not separated by command. Below them stretched thousands of men, Northmen, wildlings, Night's Watch brothers. Above them, the sky darkened unnaturally, and in the distance through falling snow, shapes moved, blue eyes like stars in the night. Robb drew his sword, Jon gripped Longclaw. Two kings, one war, and this time there would be no southern politics to blame for defeat, no wedding feast betrayal, no hidden knives, only ice, only death, only survival. The horn at the top of the wall blew once, then twice, then 3 times, and the dead began to charge. The sound of the third horn did not fade quickly. It rolled across the ice fields like a warning from the gods themselves. 3 blasts, the signal every ranger feared. The dead were not a rumor anymore. They were here. Snow fell hard, thick and blinding. Torches flickered along the wall, their flames fighting the wind. Below, thousands of figures moved in unnatural silence. No war cries, no drums, just the steady march of death. Robb felt it in his chest. Not fear exactly. Something heavier. Responsibility. Jon's voice cut through the chaos. Archers, wait for my mark. The army of the North stood shoulder to shoulder with wildlings who only months ago had been enemies. Tormund Giant's Bane gripped a massive axe, grinning like a madman despite the terror in his eyes. About time we fight something honest, he muttered. Robb stepped beside Jon atop the wall. For a brief second, they looked at one another, not as kings, not as commanders, but as brothers who once raced through Winterfell's courtyard with wooden swords. If we fall, Robb said quietly, the North falls. Jon nodded. Then we don't fall. The first wave came fast. Whites slammed into the wall's base like a tide of corpses. Some began climbing over each other, clawing upward with broken fingers. Archers released flaming arrows. Fire spread through the front ranks. But the dead did not scream. They burned and kept moving until they collapsed. Dragonglass-tipped bolts flew. Where they struck, bodies shattered into frozen fragments. But for every one that fell, two more advanced. Then the White Walkers appeared. Tall, armored in frost, eyes glowing blue through the storm. The air itself seemed to freeze around them. One raised a spear, made of ice, and hurled it. It pierced through a giant fighting near the gate, killing him instantly. The body dropped like a felled tree. Robb swore under his breath. They command them. Jon's jaw tightened. Kill the commanders. The army weakens. Without another word, Robb turned to the captains. Open the inner gate. Cavalry with me. Are you mad? Someone shouted. Probably, Robb replied, already moving. Jon grabbed his arm. You ride out there. You might not come back. You ride out there. You might not come back. Robb gave a crooked smile. That's why you're here. And then he was gone, descending the wall to lead a charge into hell. The gates thundered open, and Northern cavalry burst out into the snowstorm. Hooves crushed frozen bodies. Steel flashed. Direwolves leapt into the fray, tearing through whites with savage fury. Robb cut through the dead with wild precision, his sword rising and falling in brutal rhythm. Grey wind was a blur of teeth and blood. Jon stayed atop the wall, eyes locked onto one of the White Walkers moving with terrifying calm behind the front lines. He made a decision. Hold the line, he shouted before sprinting toward the stairwell. He did not wait for permission. He did not announce his plan. He ran straight into the storm. When Jon reached the battlefield, the cold hit like a blade. The White Walker he had seen stood about 30 yards away, observing the slaughter as if it were a game. Their eyes met. The creature tilted its head slightly, then it raised its hand. Half the fallen corpses around Jon twitched and rose again. Men Robb had just cut down stood back up, blue-eyed and empty. Jon charged. The White Walker moved with impossible speed. Iceblade meeting Valyrian steel in a clash that rang like thunder. Longclaw held. The creature seemed surprised. They fought in the snow, steel against frost. Around them, chaos raged. Robb saw Jon engaged and forced his horse toward him, cutting down whites in his path. A second White Walker entered the fight. Robb leapt from his horse without hesitation. Two brothers stood back to back in the storm, surrounded by death. This was not politics. This was not pride. This was survival. Robb engaged the second Walker, his northern forged blade struggling against enchanted ice. Sparks and frost burst with every clash. Jon managed to lock blades with his opponent and, with a desperate surge of strength, drove Longclaw through its chest. The creature shattered like glass. Instantly, dozens of whites around them collapsed. Robb saw it happen. Kill the others, he roared. But the remaining White Walker was stronger, smarter. It parried Robb's strike and knocked him to one knee with unnatural force. Before it could finish him, Jon tackled it from the side. The three of them crashed into the snow. The Walker grabbed Jon by the throat. Frost spread across his armor. His breath froze in his lungs. Robb, gasping, crawled toward them. With the last of his strength, he drove his sword not into the Walker but into Jon's hand. Jon understood instantly. He grabbed the hilt and thrust upward with Longclaw. The blade pierced the White Walker's skull. It exploded into shards of ice. The battlefield shifted. Hundreds of whites dropped lifeless. The remaining dead began retreating into the storm, as if pulled back by some unseen command. The horn sounded again long and uncertain. The North had survived the first assault, but at terrible cost. Bodies lay everywhere. Giants, wildlings, Northmen, brothers of the Watch. Robb helped Jon to his feet. Frost still clung to Jon's cloak. "You're an idiot," Robb muttered, half laughing through exhaustion. Jon coughed. "You rode into an army of the dead." They stood there in the falling snow, battered but alive. Behind them the wall still stood, but both of them knew something deeper. This had not been the full force. It had been a test. And somewhere in the endless white north, the true king of the dead had watched. Winter had only just begun. The dead did not return the next night, or the night after. That was what made it worse. The wall stood silent under a sky too clear for comfort. The snow had stopped, and the cold felt sharper somehow, like the world was holding its breath. Fires burned constantly now, and every shadow looked suspicious. Funerals lasted 3 days. Northmen and wildlings were burned side by side. The Night's Watch said their words. Tormund stood quietly for once, staring into the flames like he was trying to memorize the faces of the fallen. Even the hard men of Bear Island wiped their eyes when the giant's body was set alight. Robb watched it all with clenched fists. Jon watched differently. He counted losses, measured remaining strength, calculated how many more attacks they could survive. When they finally stood alone in the Lord Commander's tower, the weight of it pressed down. "That wasn't their full army," Jon said quietly. "No," Robb agreed. "It wasn't." They both knew what that meant. Scouts reported something terrifying. The army of the dead wasn't just marching south, it was spreading. Villages north of the wall were gone, not burned, not looted, just empty. Entire wildling clans had vanished. "They're harvesting," Jon muttered after hearing the reports. Robb looked at him sharply. "Harvesting, every battle makes them stronger." The realization settled heavily between them. The North could not afford a long war, so Robb made a decision that would shake Westeros again. He sent ravens south, not to surrender, not to negotiate peace, but to demand alliance. To King's Landing, to the Vale, to Dorne, even to the Iron Islands. The message was simple. "Fight us if you wish. But when the dead reach your gates, we will not ride south again." Some called it a bluff, others called it madness. In King's Landing, the Iron Throne reacted with disbelief. Cersei Lannister laughed when she heard it. "Let the wolves freeze," she reportedly said. But Tyrion Lannister, far more observant, did not laugh. "If even half of this is true," he warned the court, "we are not prepared." Tywin Lannister had once underestimated the North. His daughter would not make the same mistake, but her pride ran deeper than reason. Back at the wall, the tension grew unbearable. Then something unexpected happened. Daenerys Targaryen landed on Dragonstone. Her arrival sent shockwaves through every political structure in the Seven Kingdoms. A Targaryen queen with dragons. When news reached Winterfell, Robb and Jon stood over the map in silence. "Dragons," Robb murmured. Jon's expression shifted slightly. Something stirred in him at the word, though he didn't fully understand why. "If they can burn them," Robb said slowly, "it changes everything. Or it makes her the most powerful ruler alive," Jon replied. "Stronger than two kings in the north." That truth hung between them. Robb leaned back in his chair. "Then we meet her." The council exploded with argument. "You'll kneel to a Targaryen," a northern lord shouted. "We will not kneel," Robb said sharply. "We will speak." And so, for the first time, the two wolves sailed south together. Dragonstone was unlike anything the North had seen. Black stone shaped like dragons, fire pits glowing even in daylight, and above it all, circling the sky, dragons. When Drogon passed overhead, even Robb felt small. Jon didn't look afraid. He looked connected. Daenerys Targaryen met them in the throne room carved from volcanic rock. Silver hair, violet eyes, calm, controlled power. "You are the king in the north," she said to Robb. "And you are the queen across the sea," Robb replied evenly. Her eyes shifted to Jon. "And you?" "Also king in the north," Jon answered simply. That caught her off guard. Two kings standing side by side, neither behind the other. Negotiations were tense. Daenerys demanded loyalty. Robb demanded alliance. Jon demanded survival. "You fight for a throne," Jon said plainly. "We fight for the living." Daenerys studied him carefully. "Show me," she finally said. So they did. They brought a captured white in chains to Dragonstone. When it rose and lunged in the throne room, even the unsullied flinched. Drogon roared in response. Fire ended the creature instantly. Silence followed. Daenerys turned to them slowly. "If what you say is true," she said, "then the war for the throne can wait." It was not surrender. It was something new, an alliance forged not by love or ambition, but by necessity. Dragons would fly north, but fate, as always, demanded payment. On the journey back beyond the wall to demonstrate the scale of the threat, disaster struck. The Night King himself appeared. And this time, he did not test. He hunted. In the chaos beyond the wall, one of Daenerys' dragons was struck from the sky by an ice spear. The beast fell screaming into the frozen lake below. The scream that tore from Daenerys echoed for miles. Jon barely escaped with his life, dragged onto Drogon's back as the surviving dragons retreated. From the sky, they saw it, the Night King standing over the frozen lake. Raising his hands, moments later, the surface cracked, and the fallen dragon rose again, blue eyes blazing. The dead now had wings. Back at Winterfell, as the alliance solidified and armies gathered, fear spread faster than ever. They had thought the wall was their shield. Now they realized the sky belonged to death, too. Robb stood on Winterfell's battlements that night, staring north. Jon joined him silently. "We've united the North," Robb said. "We've united the realm," Jon added. Robb's voice dropped lower. "Will it be enough?" Jon didn't answer immediately. Far in the distance, lightning flickered in a storm that should not exist. "No," Jon said quietly, "it won't." And for the first time since they were crowned, both kings understood something terrifying. To win this war, one of them might have to fall. The wall fell at dawn, not with a slow crumble, not with a long siege. It shattered in a single terrifying moment. The dead dragon came out of the storm first. Blue fire tore across the sky, not orange like living flame, but cold and blinding. It struck the wall with a sound that split the earth itself. Ice that had stood for thousands of years cracked like thin glass. Men screamed. Giants roared. Horns blew in panic. From Winterfell, they could not see it, but they felt it. The ground trembled faintly beneath their boots. A raven arrived hours later, half frozen, barely alive. The message was short. "The wall is broken. They are coming." Silence filled the great hall. No one argued this time. No one questioned Jon. No one whispered about wildlings. The war had reached them. Robb stood from his seat slowly. He looked older than he had weeks before. Then Winterfell becomes the line, and so the North prepared for its last stand. Every able-bodied man and woman was armed. Blacksmiths worked until their hands bled. Dragon glass weapons were distributed carefully. The Dothraki riders sharpened curved blades beside northern spearmen who once would have feared them. Dragons circled above Winterfell like restless gods. Jon and Robb stood together in the courtyard as soldiers trained. "Do you regret it?" Robb asked quietly. "Crowning us both?" Jon looked at him. "No. If I had ruled alone, you'd still be fighting," Jon said calmly. "Just with fewer men." Robb gave a faint smile. "Just with fewer men." Robb gave a faint smile. "You always were the quiet one, and you were always too loud." For a moment they laughed. It felt almost normal, but normal was gone. That night, Bran Stark, no longer just a boy, but something older, spoke words that froze Jon's blood. "The Night King wants you," Bran said softly. Jon held his gaze. "Why?" "Because you are not just a Stark." The truth that had been hidden his whole life finally came forward. He was Aegon Targaryen, the son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark. Not a bastard, not illegitimate, the true heir to the Iron Throne. Robb was silent when he heard it. The room emptied, leaving only the two of them. Jon looked uncertain for the first time in years. "I never wanted, you're still my brother," Robb cut in. Jon's voice tightened. "If the realm finds out, the realm can burn," Robb said sharply. "You are Stark in everything that matters." But something had shifted, not between them, around them. If Jon was the rightful heir, Daenerys' claim weakened. Political tension, even now, began quietly spreading through the alliance. War outside, power struggle inside, and the dead marching closer every hour. Scouts reported villages destroyed, castles abandoned. The army of the dead was massive now. Every loss along the way strengthened it. The final battle began on a moonless night. The sky turned black long before sunset. From Winterfell's walls they saw it, a sea of bodies stretching beyond sight. Torches were useless. Fire pits barely illuminated the front ranks. The cold felt alive. Robb addressed the northern soldiers. "We stand here not as houses, not as banners, but as the living." Jon addressed the wildlings. "Tonight, we fight for tomorrow." Daenerys mounted Drogon. The other dragon roared beside her. The horns blew. The Dothraki charged first. Their flaming aurochs looked beautiful in the darkness. Then, one by one, the lights went out. Silence followed. The dead surged forward like a tidal wave. The Unsullied held formation. Northern spears braced. Wildlings screamed war cries. Impact. The first clash nearly broke the lines instantly. Whites climbed over each other, crushing shields, biting, clawing. Dragon glass shattered them, but not fast enough. Dragons unleashed firestorms from above, carving burning trenches through the undead. But then the dead dragon rose to meet them. Blue flame collided with orange in the sky. Jon watched the chaos unfold and made a decision. "Protect Bran," he told Robb. "And you?" Robb demanded. "I end this." Jon mounted Rhaegal and flew into the storm. Robb stayed on the ground, cutting through wave after wave of undead, rallying broken lines, dragging wounded soldiers to safety. The Night King entered the battlefield like a shadow becoming solid. He walked calmly through dragonfire untouched. Jon landed before him. This was the end of it. Steel met ice again. But this time, the Night King was ready, stronger, faster. Jon was thrown back hard, barely regaining his footing. Inside Winterfell's Godswood, Bran waited. The Night King advanced toward him, ignoring the battle. Robb saw it happening. He understood instantly. He fought his way through the courtyard, bleeding, exhausted. Jon charged again, engaging the Night King in brutal combat. Every strike felt heavier, every movement slower. The Night King disarmed him. Longclaw fell into the snow. For a heartbeat, everything froze. The Night King raised his blade to finish Jon, and Robb tackled him from the side. The impact stunned the ancient being just long enough. Jon grabbed a fallen dragonglass dagger. Robb held the Night King in place, screaming through the freezing pain as ice began spreading across his armor. "Now!" Robb shouted. Jon hesitated. He saw the frost consuming his brother's chest. "Jon!" Robb roared. With a cry torn from somewhere deep in his soul, Jon drove the dagger into the Night King's heart. The world exploded into light. The Night King shattered. Every white collapsed instantly. Silence fell across Winterfell. Snow drifted gently over thousands of lifeless bodies. Jon turned to Robb. Frost covered him almost entirely. Robb's breathing was shallow. "You see?" Robb whispered faintly. "Two wolves." Jon fell to his knees beside him. "Stay with me." Robb managed a weak smile. "You were always meant for more, brother." His hand went still. The war was over, but victory demanded its price. Winter had been defeated, but one king remained. Winterfell did not cheer. When the dead fell, there was no great roar of triumph. No celebration, only silence. The kind of silence that follows something too big for the heart to carry. Snow drifted over the battlefield, covering the fallen in white. Northmen, wildlings, unsullied, Dothraki, friends, enemies. It no longer mattered. Jon knelt beside Robb long after the others began moving. They tried to pull him away gently. He didn't move. Grey Wind lay nearby, unmoving, having fallen earlier in the battle, protecting Robb's flank. Ghost stood beside Jon now, silent, pressing against him, as if understanding loss better than men ever could. At dawn, the fires began. Robb Stark, king in the north, was laid upon a great pyre in the courtyard of Winterfell. His sword rested across his chest, the direwolf banner draped over his armor. The north gathered. Tormund stood with red-rimmed eyes. Davos removed his gloves and bowed his head. Even the Unsullied knelt in silent respect. Daenerys watched from a distance, her face unreadable. Jon stepped forward with the torch. His hands did not shake, but his voice, when he spoke, carried the weight of everything. He was my brother, my king, my other half. The wind picked up slightly, carrying his words through the courtyard. He believed the North could stand united. He believed we were stronger together than alone. Jon paused, swallowing the grief rising in his throat. He was right. He lowered the torch. Flames rose high, swallowing wood and cloth and memory. The North wept openly. They had lost many, but they had lost their young wolf. Days passed in mourning, then reality returned. The realm still stood fractured. The Iron Throne still waited in King's Landing. And now, with the truth of Jon's birth spreading quietly among the lords, everything had changed again. In the great hall, the northern banners gathered once more. This time, there was no debate, no hesitation. Lyanna Mormont, fierce even in grief, stood first. The king in the north, she declared. Voices echoed her. Jon rose slowly. No, he said. The hall fell silent. The war against the dead is over, but the realm remains divided. I will not be crowned here while the South prepares for another war. Murmurs spread. You would kneel to the Dragon Queen. Someone demanded. Jon's expression hardened. I will not kneel, and I will not fight her. That answer satisfied no one fully, but they trusted him. He had ended winter. In Dragonstone and King's Landing, news of the victory and Robb's death shifted the political landscape overnight. Cersei Lannister saw weakness. One wolf left, she remarked coldly, and surrounded by foreigners. But Daenerys saw something else, opportunity and threat. Jon Snow Aegon Targaryen had united the North, defeated death itself, and carried the stronger claim to the throne. Whispers grew among her advisors. If he presses his claim, many will follow him. But Jon did not press it. Instead, he marched south with a unified army, not to conquer blindly, but to end the last cycle of war. King's Landing prepared for siege. Cersei fortified the city with wildfire and desperation. She believed fear would protect her. She underestimated how tired the realm was of burning. The battle for King's Landing was brutal but shorter than expected. Without the army of the dead draining their strength, the northern forces were disciplined and relentless. Drogon shattered the city gates. The Golden Company broke under pressure from both Stark and Targaryen banners. Jon led from the front again, not with fury like Robb, but with quiet determination. When the Red Keep finally fell, Cersei Lannister did not flee. She stood on her balcony defiant to the end. The lion had run out of claws. With her fall, the War of Crowns ended. But peace is harder to win than battle. Inside the throne room, melted iron twisted from dragonfire still lined the floor. Daenerys stood before the Iron Throne. Jon entered quietly. This was the moment history would remember. You are the rightful heir, Daenerys said without turning. I don't want it, Jon answered honestly. That doesn't change what you are. He stepped closer. I am a Stark. And a Targaryen. Silence filled the ruined hall. If I take the throne, Jon said slowly, the North loses what it fought for. And if I take it, she replied, the realm questions my claim. Two rulers again, history repeating in a different shape. But Jon had learned from ruling beside Robb. Power did not need to stand alone. The Seven Kingdoms have bled enough, Jon said. Let them choose a new way. And so something unprecedented happened. The Iron Throne was not claimed by conquest. It was dissolved. The great houses gathered. A council was formed. Each kingdom granted greater independence, united under a shared pact rather than absolute rule. The North remained free. The South governed itself. Daenerys ruled Dragonstone and oversaw the eastern territories, her dragons a symbol of protection, not domination. And Jon returned to Winterfell, not as king, not as conqueror, but as the last wolf. He stood often on the battlements where he and Robb once spoke of winter. The North was rebuilding. Children laughed again in the courtyard. Wildlings and Northmen farmed the same lands. Sometimes at night, Jon thought he heard Robb's voice carried on the wind. Two wolves. They had ruled together. They had fought together. And in the end, they had saved the world together. And in the end, they had saved the world together. One with fire. One with ice. And though only one remained standing, the North would always remember that it once had two kings, and that together they were stronger than any throne.